I still remember the exact moment my phone buzzed that afternoon. I was folding laundry, half distracted, half exhausted, when his name lit up my screen with a photo preview that made my heart stumble. It was him, my husband, posed in a way he hadn't tried for me in years, shirt halfway down, lips parted, that smug little smirk he used to think was irresistible. And the message under it? So you don't forget what we did last night. I swear for a second my fingers went numb. We hadn't done anything last night. He'd claimed he was working overtime. So who exactly was that photo meant for? Before I could even take a proper breath, the notification vanished. The photo deleted itself from the thread, leaving nothing but the echo of the preview burned into my mind. I just stood there, frozen, feeling the room tilt a little. My mouth tasted like metal, and all I could hear was my heartbeat in my ears. Fast, frantic, confused. It was like my brain tried to protect me by pretending maybe I misread it, maybe I imagined the whole damn thing. But my chest told the truth before my mind was willing to. Something was very, very wrong. When he got home later that day, he was humming. Humming. Like someone who'd had an easy, ordinary evening. He didn't mention the photo. He didn't even look nervous. He kissed my forehead casually, something he hadn't done in months, and said he was starving after so much overtime. I remember nodding, playing along, but inside I was already collapsing in slow motion. That tiny gesture of affection, suddenly resurrected, felt like a blade slipping between my ribs. I didn't say a word. But right then, in the quiet between us, something inside me quietly clicked into place. That night, I lay beside him pretending to sleep, listening to the familiar rhythm of his breathing. It used to comfort me. Now it felt like a stranger's presence in my own bed. My mind kept replaying the photo, his bare chest, the dim lighting, the tone of the message. I kept asking myself when exactly he stopped wanting me and started wanting whoever she was. Every time his arm brushed mine, my stomach twisted like I was allergic to his touch. But I stayed perfectly still, because silence suddenly felt safer than the truth. At some point, he rolled over and mumbled something about another long day tomorrow. His voice was thick with sleep, soft, unbothered. And that's what cut the deepest. He wasn't worried. Not even a flicker of guilt. Not even the slightest hint that he had just sent the wrong woman the wrong message. If he noticed the photo went to me instead of his lover, he didn't show it. That kind of confidence, that kind of boldness, it told me this wasn't new. This wasn't some sudden lapse. This was routine for him. A pattern, a habit. And while he drifted off, I opened my eyes and stared at the ceiling, realizing I was at a crossroads, confront him and let him lie to my face, or stay silent and really see who he was when he thought I wasn't watching. I felt this cold, sharp calm settle over me, like clarity. I knew him well enough to predict every excuse he'd try to spin. I didn't want words. I wanted truth. And truth, with men like him, only appears when they don't know you're looking. So I turned my back to him and made a quiet vow to myself. From this moment on, I would follow every step he took. The next morning, I woke up before he did, something I rarely managed. I watched him sleep for a moment, really studied his face. It was strange. He looked peaceful, almost innocent, as if he wasn't living a second life right under my nose. Part of me wanted to shake him awake and scream, demand answers, demand explanations he'd simply twist into more lies. But another part of me, the quieter, steadier part, whispered that patience would serve me better than rage. So I slipped out of bed, made coffee, and pretended everything was normal while my insides tightened like a fist. When he finally came into the kitchen, he stretched his arms around me from behind like he used to years ago. "Did you sleep all right?" he asked, his voice warm, almost tender. I felt my skin crawl. I told him yes, of course, as if the night hadn't shattered something fundamental inside me. He didn't mention the message, not a single hint of hesitation. And that silence, that boldness, confirmed everything. He genuinely believed I was clueless. He believed he could keep playing both sides without consequences. And I realized right then, His arrogance would be the very thing that destroyed him. As he left for work, I stood by the kitchen window and watched him walk to his car. The same routine as always, same step, same bag, same fake goodbye smile. But this time, I memorized everything. I memorized the exact hour, the exact route he usually took, the way he checked his phone before turning on the engine. And while he backed out of the driveway, I felt a small, steady flame spark to life in my chest. Not rage, strategy. I picked up my own phone, opened the tracking app I'd quietly prepared, and whispered to myself, "Let's see who you really are." Following him for the first time felt surreal, like I was stepping into someone else's life. I waited 10 minutes after he drove off, then grabbed my keys and slipped into my car, my pulse thudding so hard it felt like it might crack my ribs. I kept enough distance to stay invisible, but close enough not to lose him. Every time he changed lanes, my throat tightened. It amazed me how quickly fear and adrenaline intertwined into something almost electric. And beneath it all, there was this humiliating, hollow ache, because a wife shouldn't have to stalk her own husband to learn the truth. He didn't go straight to work. Of course he didn't. Instead, he turned down a quieter part of town, the kind of street where people mind their own business. I gripped the steering wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. I watched him park near an old brick apartment building I'd never seen before. He checked his phone, smirked, and walked inside like a man arriving home. I stayed parked half a block away, my heart hammering, my stomach churning with a mix of nausea and rage. In that moment, I knew this wasn't guessing anymore. This was confirmation. I sat there watching the front door, feeling the air in my car grow thick and suffocating. I imagined her inside, imagined him holding her, laughing with her, living a whole different version of himself behind my back. I hated that my brain painted pictures I didn't want to see but couldn't stop. Minutes passed like hours. My hands shook, not because I doubted what was happening, but because seeing it with my own eyes hurt far more than I expected. And yet, even through the sting, I felt something awakening, a cold, determined clarity that whispered, "You need proof. All of it." I stayed in the car for almost an hour, pretending to scroll on my phone so anyone passing by wouldn't think I was spying. But every sound, the slam of a distant door, footsteps echoing on the pavement, made me flinch. I kept wondering if he ever thought about me while he was in there, if I even crossed his mind. The idea that he could walk into another woman's home with the same ease he walked into mine made my chest burn. It wasn't just betrayal, it was erasure, like I'd been quietly replaced and no one bothered to tell me. When he finally came out, he looked lighter, relaxed. The kind of relaxed a man gets after being with someone he wants, someone he chooses. He checked his reflection in his car window like he was trying to look presentable before going back to the life he'd left waiting. I forced myself to stay still, to breathe shallow and quiet, even though I felt like screaming. Instead of heading to work, he drove to a cafe, sat outside, and laughed on a phone call, loud, carefree, like a teenager flirting. I recorded the whole scene from a distance, every second fueling the file I'd started building. Watching him like that changed something in me. A part of me broke, yes, but another part hardened, like metal tempered by fire. I wasn't just a hurt wife anymore. I was an investigator, a witness, a woman gathering the truth piece by painful piece. I began noticing the smallest details, how his clothes seemed freshly ironed when he claimed he slept at the office, how he checked his phone when he thought no one was looking, how he started humming again after years of tension at home. Little things that only make sense when the lie finally reveals itself. Over the next weeks, following him became part of my routine, something I hated, yet couldn't stop. Every lie he told me became a breadcrumb leading to another truth he never meant for me to see. I tracked his routes, the times he left, the minutes he stayed at that apartment building. I even learned the rhythm of their meetings, Tuesdays and Thursdays, always in the afternoon, always long enough for him to come home smelling like expensive soap instead of sweat. Each discovery felt like another crack in the version of him I used to love. I started saving everything, screenshots of deleted messages, photographs from a distance, timestamps, receipts that didn't match his stories. There was one afternoon when I watched him buy wine and flowers before walking upstairs. It was the kind of thing he hadn't done for me in years. The image of him carrying those roses for someone else burned into my mind so deeply I had to grip the steering wheel just to steady myself. I felt humiliated, yes, but beneath the humiliation there was a growing, simmering certainty. One day, all of this would come back to him like an avalanche. And then came the discovery that changed everything. It happened late one night after he fell asleep on the couch, phone in hand. I went to plug it into the charger, but when I picked it up, something inside the armrest shifted. Curious, I reached in, and my fingers closed around a second phone, a hidden one. Black case, no scratches, no wallpaper. My breath caught in my throat, my legs nearly gave out. This wasn't just cheating. This was an entire secret life built in the shadows. And right then, holding that phone, I realized I was only at the surface of something far worse. I didn't open the second phone right away. For a long moment, I just stood there in the dark living room, holding it like it was a bomb that could go off with the wrong touch. My hands trembled so badly I had to set it on the coffee table and take a breath that barely filled my lungs. He snored softly on the couch, completely unaware that his entire empire of lies was literally sitting between us. Part of me wanted to throw the phone at his chest and scream until my voice broke. But another part, the part that had been quietly sharpening over the months, knew better. I needed to see everything first. When I finally turned it on, the screen lit up without asking for a passcode. That alone told me everything I needed to know. People only leave devices unlocked when they think no one will ever touch them. Notifications spilled down the screen, messages from names I didn't recognize, heart emojis, late-night calls, photos. My heart didn't even pound this time. It just sank, as if it had finally accepted defeat. I opened the most recent thread, and there she was, the woman from the apartment building. Their messages were casual, intimate, sickeningly familiar. He told her he missed her laugh. He told her he wished he could wake up next to her. He told her lies wrapped in tenderness he hadn't given me in years. But it was one voice note that broke me in a way I didn't expect. He had sent it hours earlier while he told me he was exhausted and needed space. I pressed play, and his whisper filled the room, soft, warm, dripping with affection. He told her he couldn't stop thinking about the night before. He told her she made him feel alive. He said he wished I, his wife, didn't cling so much. I covered my mouth, swallowing a sob so violent it felt like it might tear something inside me. Hearing those words, spoken so gently to someone else, was worse than seeing any photo. It was like watching the past 10 years of my life dissolve into nothing. I kept scrolling through the messages even though every word felt like glass cutting through my chest. There were dates, plans, jokes they shared, even petty complaints about me. Things he never had the courage to say to my face. He told her I was too serious, too career-focused, too cold, as if the version of me he'd slowly killed off with neglect had somehow become my fault. What hurt most wasn't the lies he said about me. It was how effortlessly he said them. Like betraying me wasn't just easy, it was natural, routine, almost comforting to him. I found photos too, nothing explicit, but intimate in ways that stabbed deeper. A picture of her legs on his lap, a video of them cooking together, his hand slipping around her waist like it belonged there, a selfie of him kissing her cheek while she laughed, and all I could think was how many times I'd asked him to take a picture with me, and he'd said he wasn't into that couple stuff. My fingers hovered over each image, my throat tight, a sour taste rising in my mouth. They weren't just having an affair, they were playing house, living a life I thought I had with him. Somewhere between the photos and the messages, something inside me snapped, but not in the way I expected. It wasn't rage. It wasn't despair. It was a strange, cold clarity, like someone had turned off the emotional switch and left only strategy behind. I looked at the phone, then at him sleeping on the couch, unaware that his whole world was unraveling inches away. And for the first time since this nightmare began, I didn't feel powerless. I felt awake. I realized I didn't want to confront him. I wanted to dismantle him, slowly, precisely, using nothing but the truth he thought I'd never see. I spent the rest of that night sitting on the floor, the second phone glowing in my lap like a confession he never meant to give. I didn't sleep. I couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard his whispers to her, heard him say things he'd stopped saying to me years ago. My mind kept drifting back through our past, replaying all the nights he claimed to be tired, all the weekends he said he needed to catch up on work, all the arguments he twisted into being my fault. It was like watching a puzzle finally complete itself, revealing a picture I'd been too loyal to see. By dawn, I had gone through every message, every photo, every call log, and hidden between the lies, I found proof of something even older. They had been together long before I suspected, before the overtime shifts, before the distance, before the coldness in his eyes. Some messages were over a year old, voice notes discussing trips, gifts, even routines. I felt my chest tighten with a mix of heartbreak and humiliation. The life I thought I shared with him had been crumbling long before I realized there were cracks at all. I wasn't losing him. I had lost him long ago. When the sun finally rose, a strange calm settled over me. I gathered the phone, screenshots, and recordings into a folder on my laptop, labeling everything with dates and times. The evidence wasn't for confrontation. Not yet. It was for survival, for leverage, for the moment he'd least expect. As he woke up and stretched on the couch, yawning like a man who had nothing to hide, I quietly placed the second phone back where I found it. I poured myself a cup of coffee, hands steady for the first time in weeks, and whispered to my reflection in the window, "This isn't the end. This is the beginning." In the days that followed, something shifted between us, but only I knew why. He acted lighter, almost cheerful, as if whatever secret life he was living had somehow made him a better husband. He brought me coffee in the morning, asked about my day, even complimented the dress I wore to work. And while he played the role of an attentive partner, I watched him with the calm precision of someone studying a predator. Every smile he offered felt like a performance. Every casual touch felt rehearsed. And every time he said he loved me, something cold inside me whispered, "Say it now. It's the last time you'll ever get to." Meanwhile, I was building a case so solid he wouldn't have space to breathe. I organized the messages from the second phone, time-stamped videos of him entering her building, screenshots of bank transactions that matched the gifts I saw on her social media. I even tracked his patterns down to minutes, how long he stayed, what days he went, the time he usually called her before driving home. I didn't confront him because I didn't need to. All I needed was one final piece, one last proof that tied the whole thing together so tightly even he couldn't lie his way out. One afternoon, while he claimed to be running late at the office, I hired a private investigator, someone recommended quietly by a friend who had once fought her own war with infidelity. I sat across from the PI in a small corner booth at a cafe, my hands steady around my cup as I explained everything. He listened without judgment, nodding slowly, already planning routes, angles, legal details. When I handed him the file I'd compiled, he raised his eyebrows. "You've done half my job for me," he said. And hearing that I had built something undeniable, gave me a sense of power I hadn't felt in years. The PI moved fast, faster than I expected. Within days, he had photos that made my stomach twist and my resolve sharpen. Clear shots of my husband kissing her at her doorway, carrying overnight bags into her building, even picking her up for lunch during hours he swore he was drowning in deadlines. Seeing those images printed on glossy paper felt different than watching from a distance. It wasn't just suspicion anymore. It wasn't even betrayal. It was evidence solid enough to shatter the life he thought he'd built in secret. And I realized I wasn't just documenting his lies. I was preparing his downfall. At home, he grew even more affectionate, almost clingy, as if he sensed something shifting but couldn't put his finger on it. One evening, he wrapped his arms around me while I cooked and said he felt like we were getting close again. I nearly laughed. Instead, I stirred the pot and murmured something soft, something harmless. Inside, though, I was cold. Watching him play the part of a devoted husband after leaving another woman's bed just hours before felt like witnessing a bad actor who didn't know the audience already had the script. His tenderness didn't warm me anymore. It repulsed me. One night, while he showered, longer than usual, probably trying to wash off evidence he didn't know I had. I quietly opened his laptop. I wasn't looking for messages. He was too careful for that. I was looking for receipts, cloud backups, digital footprints he'd forgotten about. And I found them. Hotel reservations for 2, a charge for a spa package he claimed was for a coworker's birthday, location history that betrayed every lie he'd told in the last 3 months. As the water ran in the background, I sat at his desk with a strange, steady calm, saving everything into my growing file. I wasn't emotional anymore. I was methodical. The final piece I needed came from somewhere I hadn't expected. His parents. They adored me, always had, and I'd kept my distance from them through all of this, partly out of shame, and partly out of fear they might see the truth written on my face. But when his mother called one afternoon asking why he seemed distracted lately, something inside me shifted. I didn't give details, just enough to let her know that something was deeply wrong. Her silence on the other end of the line was long and heavy. When she finally said, "Come by this weekend, alone," I knew she already suspected more than she was willing to admit. When I visited them, I brought only a fraction of the evidence, just enough to make the truth undeniable, but not enough to give them the full horror of it. His mother covered her mouth as she looked at the photos, her eyes glassy with hurt and disbelief. His father's jaw tightened, anger creeping through the wrinkles around his eyes. "After everything we taught him," he muttered. Hearing him say that didn't make me happy. It didn't give me satisfaction. It broke something in me all over again. But it also cemented something important. When the time came, I wouldn't be standing alone. That night, I sat at my kitchen table after he fell asleep, the entire house humming with quiet tension. My laptop glowed in front of me, filled with months of evidence, proof of every lie, every betrayal, every hour he'd stolen from our marriage. I organized the final documents into a neat, devastating file. Then I emailed everything to my lawyer, attaching a simple message: "I'm ready." As I hit send, a strange, liberating calm washed over me. I wasn't afraid anymore. I wasn't broken. I wasn't doubting myself. I was prepared, and he had no idea that the next chapter of his life was about to collapse right under his feet. The morning I chose to end everything felt strangely ordinary. He was sitting at the table, scrolling through his phone, sipping coffee like a man with nothing to lose. I stood in the doorway for a moment, watching him the way someone watches a stranger they used to know by heart. I didn't feel nervous. I didn't feel sad. I felt steady, as if my body had finally aligned with the truth my mind had carried for months. He glanced up and smiled, completely clueless, telling me he had another long day at the office ahead. The irony almost made me laugh. I told him we needed to talk before he left. He froze for a split second, barely noticeable, but enough to confirm that some part of him knew his lies were beginning to rot from the inside. He tried to brush it off with a casual, "Can it wait? I'm running late," but I shook my head. I calmly placed the folder on the table and sat across from him. The way his eyes flickered to the stack of papers, that was the first crack. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't accuse. I simply said, "I want you to look at these." And the moment he opened the first page, all the color drained from his face. He skimmed through the photos, the messages, the timelines, every lie documented, every betrayal exposed. His breathing changed, shallow and shaky, as if the truth itself was suffocating him. Then came the denial, predictable and desperate. He said I was misreading things, that I was taking things out of context. He even tried to claim some of the photos were old. I let him speak. Let him dig his own grave with excuses he didn't even believe. When he finally ran out of lies and silence filled the room, I leaned forward and said the one sentence that shattered whatever hope he had left: "You violated our prenup." The moment the word prenup left my mouth, something broke in him. It was subtle at first. His shoulders jolted, his jaw clenched, his fingers tightened around the papers like he wanted to rip them apart but didn't dare. He whispered, "You wouldn't do that to me," as if I were the one who betrayed him. As if the months of lies, the secret phone, the other woman's apartment, the photo meant for someone else were just inconveniences. His panic rose fast, sharp, almost frantic. He said I was overreacting, that we could fix this, that he still loved me. I watched the desperation bloom behind his eyes, and for the first time in a long time, I felt nothing. When I slid the prenup across the table, highlighted, annotated, and legally sound, he swallowed hard. The clause was crystal clear. Any confirmed act of infidelity forfeited his financial protections and transferred majority assets to me. He knew it. I knew it. And now, there was no escape. He started pacing the kitchen, running his hands through his hair, mumbling half-formed excuses. At one point, he actually said, "It wasn't emotional, so it shouldn't count." I almost laughed. Instead, I calmly placed the last piece of evidence in front of him, the sensual photo he sent, the one he thought he had deleted from existence. Watching his face collapse as he realized I had seen it, that was the beginning of his undoing. He collapsed into a chair, burying his face in his hands, whispering that he couldn't lose everything. You'd think I would feel triumphant, but all I felt was this quiet, hollow certainty. He hadn't cared about losing me, only his comfort, his image, his lifestyle. I told him the divorce papers were ready, that the accounts were frozen, that the lawyer had already initiated the transfers according to the prenup. His head snapped up, panic twisting every feature on his face. He actually begged me to reconsider. But his pleas slid right off me. The man sitting in front of me wasn't my husband anymore. He was just the consequence of his own choices finally catching up to him. When he realized there was no negotiation left, no loophole, no version of the truth he could twist, something inside him seemed to collapse. He looked smaller, almost fragile, like a man seeing the ruins of a life he thought he controlled. He asked if someone had told me, if his parents knew, if I had shown anyone else. I didn't answer right away. I simply watched him unravel, watched the fear settle into his posture. Then I told him calmly that his parents were aware. The way his face crumpled, it was as if losing their approval hurt more than losing our marriage. That, more than anything, showed me exactly who he had always been. He stood up suddenly and reached for me, not aggressively, just desperately, like he thought touch might anchor him back into the life he'd taken for granted. I stepped away before he could lay a hand on me. The message was clear: boundaries, dignity, finality. He whispered my name like it was a lifeline, begging me to talk, to work through this, to think about what we built. But the truth was simple. I had thought about it. For months. For nights he spent in another woman's bed. For mornings he came home smelling like soap that wasn't mine. For years he let me shoulder love alone. I gathered the folder, the prenup, the divorce documents, and walked toward the door. He followed me, still pleading, still trying to bargain with a future that no longer included him. When I reached the doorway, I turned back one last time, not out of love, but out of closure. I told him softly, "This ended long before today. Today is just the paperwork." And I watched the last trace of hope leave his eyes. Then I stepped outside, closing the door behind me with a steadiness I didn't know I had. For the first time in a very long time, the air felt clean. And I knew the next chapter of my life would finally belong to me.